I am an activist here because I have made it a point to represent the underserved and underprivileged. I, at one point in my life, have been underprivileged and had some struggles and some things that I have gone through. Raised by a single mom and a grandmother, and so I understand what's going on in our community, and we have not been represented well. So I make it a point to represent and fight for our community.
More than just a black face in a high space. He has done some amazing things in Winston-Salem on City Council pertaining to MWBE.
We need somebody that's from the city, that knows the city, that can relate to the city.
I'm looking for a progressive candidate. I'm looking for someone who's got familiarity with inequities of all types that exist in the district.
Mr. Derwin Montgomery.
Yes, sir.
Welcome to City of Greensboro meeting on tonight. You are now pursuing a great degree. Would you please tell us what you are pursuing?
A 6th congressional district, so a seat in Congress.
As a seat in Congress, you are going to be representing the City of Greensboro. You refer to Grandma's house. Grandma's house was a site for you, memory of childhood, and of course Grandma's house is now poured into you. And how do you plan on pouring into the city?
Well, for me, it's taking those lessons learned from my grandmother's house and from neighborhoods and communities that I've represented, not just currently as a member of the State House, but also as a city council member. I've had the chance to actually sit with people on their front porches and hear the issues and concerns that they have. The senior citizen who's trying to make it on Social Security, or the kid who is struggling to make it through school and figuring out, are they going to go to college, are they going to get a job, and what's going to happen. And so I think that's perspective that I'm going to bring in terms of how I make investments as a member of Congress. And so there are 3 core things that we have to do, I think, that's important: economic investment, education, and then we have to make sure that individuals from all walks of life have an opportunity when they get up in the morning and put their shoes on, put their pants on like anybody else, that they have an opportunity when they walk out the door to thrive in our society. And so we have to have doors of opportunity for everybody.
Your agenda is homelessness. Let's speak on homelessness.
So my past, so I currently work in the homeless arena, and so I work with individuals who find themselves at the bottom of the barrel. Every single safety net has failed a person when they become homeless, meaning their family structure has been challenged. The housing situation that they have has been challenged, and we see people in all walks of life. And so that's the work I've done, and it has actually shaped a lot of how I view policy and policy making. So when I'm sitting in the General Assembly and I'm making policy, it's because of the perspective that I have from doing that work. And so when it comes to homelessness, it's something that I think that we don't put enough investment in, because we believe that oftentimes people who are homeless want to be homeless. It's a stigma that I think that is unwarranted, because you drill down into it, and most people, when you look at their situation, they're a paycheck from being homeless or a crisis from being homeless. And that's just the fact that we have to figure out how we are more intentional in our work. And so we do work every day moving individuals from homelessness into housing. Last year, we housed over 130 individuals that we moved out of homelessness into some type of permanent housing. And we saw another 700 individuals that came through the doors of our shelter. I'm Derwin Montgomery, and I am a candidate for the 6th Congressional District, which encompasses Winston-Salem, Greensboro, and High Point, pretty much Guilford County and the majority of Forsyth County. And before I jump into a few things, I just want to at least tell you a little bit about myself. Back in 2009, while I was still in undergrad at Winston-Salem State University, had a crazy idea about serving my community. I saw issues and challenges in the neighborhood. I saw dilapidated housing. I saw the fact that we didn't have resources in the community, that if we wanted to have a sit-down restaurant, that we had to get in the car and drive to the other side of town. And I didn't want to just be a voice that talked about it, but I actually wanted to do something about it. So at 21 years old, I said, you know what? I'm going to run for city council. And everybody said, this kid's crazy. He's a college student. He's going to learn a lot. This is going to be a great civics lesson for him. But we worked. We organized community. We talked about the issues, and we told them what could happen if we put our vote and our voice together and we elected somebody new to the city council. And on September 15, 2009, we defeated a 16-year incumbent, not because I was the most amazing candidate, but we had amazing people who decided that they were going to get involved and get engaged and go to the ballot box and vote. And since that time, I've been reelected 3 times to the Winston-Salem City Council, and the work that I did on the council was very much community focused. We focused on investing in neighborhood, investing in community infrastructure, ensuring that we made strategic investment in housing and affordable housing in our community, and to bring public dollars to be invested in under-invested communities, and often where money had been divested and moved to other parts of our community. And later on, later on in 2018, I decided that we'd done a lot of great work at the city council. And so the opportunity came to continue to serve the community and to do so at the state level. And so I was elected to the North Carolina General Assembly, where I serve today as a member of the State House. And there we continued that same work of advocacy and working on behalf of everyday individuals. Sponsored many and numerous bills to make a difference in everyday lives, whether we're talking about the ability to ensure that if you get a ticket and get pulled over, that you can have the opportunity to continue to drive and to not have your license suspended and revoked because you don't have enough money to pay the fine. I continue to work today and got into this race for the 6th Congressional District for a few reasons. And that's because when I looked at the 6th Congressional District and I looked at the communities that make up the 6th Congressional District in Winston-Salem, Greensboro, and High Point, I saw a lot of the same issues. Whether you're in East Greensboro, East Winston, you are looking at opportunities to invest in communities because we've seen over the last several years increase in crime and gun violence. We've seen schools that are challenged at being able to educate students that are black and brown. And we've seen the fact that economic opportunity seems not to be as close for everyday individuals.
Greensboro, High Point area has increased in the past 3 years tremendously. And what I have noticed, being on the ground addressing violence, is that there is very little financial support for programs that actually address violence. So, do you have a strategic plan that you would present to the government to get federal funds to support these on the ground level programs that has a direct touch on the community?
Yeah. So, a couple of things to that point. One, when it comes to resources and getting resources down to the ground, one of the biggest problems is that there are resources out there, but they often get used for everything but what they were intended to be used for. So right now in Greensboro, Winston-Salem, High Point, there's something that's called CDBG. They're called Community Development Block Grants. And often those very same dollars can be used for the type of programs that you're talking about, but the restrictions that come down from federal government allow cities to use them for almost anything under that category. And for one of the things for me that I would push as a member of Congress is to ensure that at least a certain percentage of those funds directly go to community agencies that are actually doing the work on the ground, and not just in terms of being able to sustain existing programs, but what are the outcomes? Are you actually reducing crime in the community? Are you actually increasing education level for individuals? Are you actually increasing the economic opportunity for folks? Or are things just staying the same? Today, there are no metrics that you have to achieve in order to receive many of those funds today.
Goes as the OG said ago, like she basically said the problem with the youth now is we don't have a lot of people overseeing them and overseeing what's going on. But another issue is that you graduated from HBC, you know the importance of having someone who looks like you in a better position, which makes you want to do that same thing. But like, we live in a time now where it's like there's no connection, there's no pipeline between HBCUs and the minority neighborhoods, minority centers and stuff like that. And it's hard for a child at a young age that goes to school and see white faces getting this, white faces getting that. They don't see African Americans doing those things. So it's hard for them to believe or see themselves in that position, and that's why it's kind of hard for them to like want to do better or want to do better. So in terms of like your platform on strengthening the pipeline for HBCUs and the community, because I feel like me and my partner right there, we have a youth mentor organization at A&T, and we saw that us as African Americans going to the minority schools, them seeing us in college makes them like gives them hope. And I feel like if we want to strengthen that, we have to make it like advertise more that black people are being successful, black people are going to college and getting different things. So in terms of that, as Congress, would you implement something that strengthened the HBCU, the community, minority community pipeline?
Yep. So number one, hands down, I am one of the biggest advocates you can find for support of our HBCUs. I am a proud product of HBCU. My brother and my sister and I, we all went to HBCUs, and neither one of our parents went to an HBCU. We just all self-decided that we wanted to go to an HBCU because we believed that that was going to be a place that nurtured us and supported us and gave us what we needed. One of the challenges is that over the years, particularly in the last 10 years, we've seen the number of accredited HBCUs in the country continue to decline. And we've even seen just here recently in Greensboro, one of the challenges with Bennett and being able to make sure that we're able to firm up the financial stability of our HBCUs. And so for me, it's twofold. In order for folks in neighborhoods and communities to achieve, it's all about exposure. What you see, just like you said, what you see is what you aspire to. So if you don't see it, it's hard for you to try to aspire to it. And so sometimes in order for you to have that aspiration, it's something you've seen on television if you don't see it in the neighborhood, but we have to be able to have that exposure for folks. And our HBCUs can't have the connection and create those pipelines in neighborhoods and communities if they're under-resourced the way that they're under-resourced today. And so we have to ensure that both at the federal level and the state level, we connect those resources. And so oftentimes where the federal funds come in is it's in the strings that's attached to the federal funds. So oftentimes it comes in and says, hey, well, we'll send an extra $100 million into a state if your state steps up and does X, Y, and Z. And those are the opportunities I think that we can do in terms of pushing more resources to HBCUs so that they can make those additional investments down with the neighborhoods to create the pipeline so that we can see young brothers and sisters who are thriving and who are doing exactly what you're saying in the neighborhood, but it comes back to ensuring that they have the resources there so that they connect back to the neighborhood, connect back to the folks in there. One of the things that we often forget is why these institutions were created in the first place. They were created to make sure that black and brown folks had opportunity because they couldn't get into the doors of other institutions. And so today, because we can go anywhere that we want to go to, we have often let down some of our institutions because we don't go there, because we don't support them. And so I think we have to combine that with both federal and state funds. And we just passed, and some of you all may have heard, they just passed a bill out of Congress signed by the president that appropriated about $250 million to HBCUs around the country. Now, to you and I, that sounds like a whole bunch of money. $250 million, I'd love to have $250 million today. I tell you, it'd be great. But $250 million spread across 100 HBCUs, that ain't a bunch of money. And so it's touted as a great investment, but in reality, when it comes to those institutions, it's not making the type of impact that some may believe. So we got to stop just doing things for the looks and actually put real funds at the table that's going to be making a difference in the institutions.
If I may, first question, I would like to know what are your views on voter ID, and what do you think? How will that protect people that may not have the proper ID, maybe visiting here from college, and they have a resident in another state to be here as a college student? And then the second question I have is, what are your views in regards to health care and helping people who are poor and disenfranchised? I help people that are disabled, trying to struggle to get disability. And one of the biggest problems that I have with helping people is that I can't get the documented help from the doctors that they need to prove that they're disabled. And as you may be aware, North Carolina is number 44 in the country for getting people approved for disability benefits. So they may wait 2 or 3 years before they can even go before a judge. And within that 2 or 3 years, they're not eligible for Medicaid or any type of insurance. So what, if anything, would you be willing to do, or what is your platform with helping people such as that?
So on voter ID, I started my advocacy work when I was an undergrad at Winston-Salem State in the NAACP. I served as first vice chair of Youth and College Division in NAACP and been a great advocate for civil rights when it comes to ensuring that we don't need to do anything that blocks the ability for folks to get to the ballot box to vote, period. So I am not a supporter of voter ID at all. I know that the voters voted for a voter ID bill, but it doesn't require us to put in place what was in place. And so I also released a statement just recently, actually, objecting to the Attorney General's decision to appeal Judge Biggs' decision, which she struck down the existing voter ID bill, which means that we don't have to have voter ID for the primary. Because I think it's the right decision to make, because we have to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to vote. Everybody has the opportunity to access the ballot box without any obstruction, period. When it comes to healthcare, you mentioned in terms of the disability side, that's part of the work that I do, and we work to try to help do just what you said for individuals who have disabilities. And I know the long, drawn-out process and the tedious nature of the paperwork and all that has to go in to justify the process for disabilities for individuals for them to receive the benefit. I'm a believer in universal health care. I believe that we should move to a single-payer option. I think that back in 2010, when President Obama pushed forward the ACA, which is now called the Obamacare, that they took off the table universal health care or a single-payer option because they were just trying to get it passed. But I go back to what I mentioned before about, when we have unified control. Again, I'm a Democrat, and he had a hard time passing that with Democrats on the House and Democrats in the Senate. And I think that when we have that kind of power, those are the moments where we got to do the transformative policy where we can move those kind of things forward. And so single payer option would ensure that no matter who you are, where you are, that we have a universal care. And that's not something, crazy or idealistic. Other countries just like ours have universal health care. They hadn't gone broke, their economies hadn't faltered, and that's some of the kind of scary fear that some people throw out there, that if we move to universal health care, somehow we're not going to be able to sustain it. But I don't think that to be fact and to be true.
Thank you.
Yeah. In addition to the other piece on it, myself along with others, and I know y'all probably already know the brother in the back right here, Representative Amos Quick, who's back there. Others, myself and others, have been very supportive of expanding Medicaid in North Carolina. We've introduced and supported bills to do so in the state legislature, but we run against the Republicans who have refused to have a vote on it, and so we continue that fight at the state level as well.
Okay, thank you.
Two questions for you. First thing, back to the trades, if I get out of prison, a lot of times I could be a plumber, but I can't be a certified plumber because the law says if I have something on my record, I can't get certified. And if I'm a plumber, I can make X amount of dollars, but I'm a certified plumber, I can make this amount. So I want you to address that, but also as a 31-year-old, as I understand it, black male, what's the challenges you get? Because said you could be Congress. Who say that? Because a lot of times, if you're a young black man, society don't expect much out of us. But you got the balls enough to say, I want to be Congress. Where did that come from?
So, one, when you talk about the plumber and the certification, it comes all the way around in terms of how we approach our criminal justice system, period. At the end of the day, we have to rethink our criminal justice system from the ground up in terms of how the policies are made, how the penalties are in place, and if someone commits a crime, then yes, all right, do the time that you need to do, but they don't have to be punished for the rest of their lives for the mistake that they made. And so we have to be able to look at that from a holistic perspective, and we've taken incremental steps to reviewing criminal justice reform. But again, we have to take this by the horns and actually address it, because right now people are suffering. People are dealing with it, and folks just want the opportunity to succeed.
I have a question, but I did want to appreciate the fact that you are a young person running for office, and ask if there are ways that you are bringing people with you along the way, and what that looks like. And then my other question is around accountability and how you would like to be held accountable. This is my second time here in a candidate for office in this very room, and I'm curious to know, you have wonderful ideas and wonderful ways to participate in doing great things for the community, but in what ways can community hold you accountable, and if there's an example you can give where you were accountable in a situation and it helped shift an experience or an outcome for a community.
Yeah. So I think the largest way that elected officials get held accountable is when we vote for them and when we don't vote for them. I think that's one of the biggest places that we do it. But at the end of the day, we got to stay engaged in the process, not just on election day, but it's when policies are moving forward, we got to make sure we're engaged in dialogue. One of the best ways that I've attempted to do that is, when I was a city council member, even now in the State House, I'm going to be in the community. I'm going to be in the neighborhood. I had more community meetings than anybody else on the council. I've had more community meetings than anyone else in my Forsyth County delegation has had in the State House, because I can't make policy if I'm not talking to the people in the neighborhood, if I'm not engaged with folks who are actually experiencing and dealing with issues every day, because that's the only way you're going to be able to hear from folks. And I've been in the rooms where folks have shouted me down, and I had to sit there and take it. And sometimes it was earned, and sometimes it was just misinformation. We didn't know all of the facts and what was happening, what was going on. And I'll give one example. It was early on when I was on city council, and it was a rezoning project. And I was new, thinking all development was good. As long as you get something in the neighborhood, folks gonna be happy about it. But not truly always understanding some of the additional ramifications of the rezoning. So I voted for the rezoning, voted for the project to come forward, not truly seeing all that was happening with that project as it moved forward. And my next community meeting, that was about 2 months later, and that I heard that directly from my neighborhood and community. I heard the issues, heard some of the things that I missed on the front end of that, and that changed how I approached the rezoning process. That meant I had one more meeting in the process in terms of when we dealt with rezonings and how I approached it, to make sure that I heard what the community wanted and what the community needed. Now, when we have this conversation in Congress, I think it was mentioned, when we're in DC, you're so far away from the people that you have to be intentional about being in conversation with folks. And so that's been the thing that I've attempted to do even as a State House. When I left the city council, and now I'm an hour and a half away from the neighborhood, every week folks in the neighborhood hear from me. They hear something from me, whether it's in an email, updating what's happening, what's going on, trying to get the feedback from what they're hearing, because at that point, it's incumbent upon the elected official to keep the conversation going. And if they don't, then folks got to speak up.
What are your thoughts on his speech in regard to what he planned for this city and this area, this state?
I particularly enjoyed the level of intent around engaging with community. I think that's super important, especially as he named, as you're making policy, and the disconnect that can exist with making policy from the people that it's actually for and the people that it actually affects. So I think he has some really great answers around the ways that he could stay engaged, whether it be the community engaging with him, and whether it be he engaging with the community. And then to my question around accountability and how he wants to be held accountable, I believe that he will live up to that and actually embody that accountability.
Serving the State House, I was there before Representative Montgomery got there, and I was assigned to be his mentor. And it took me about a week to recognize that they probably should have flipped that around. He probably should have been my mentor because of how he came to the State House and how effective he has been as a member of the State House of Representatives. And I say that here, I say that anywhere I go. What have you learned at the City Council level and at the State House level, which is a little bit different than local office? What have you learned at the State House and City Council level that will make you effective day one should you make it to Washington, D.C.?
Two things. One, I've learned how to be in connection with people, and I learned that from the City Council, because you run into folks in the grocery store, you run into folks in the parking lot, you run into folks while you're on the telephone. They don't care you're on the telephone. They don't hear what they got to tell you, and you got to listen. But at the state level, I've learned how relationships matter in terms of moving policy. And unfortunately, the way that our system is set up, because of what letter you have in front of your name can sometimes dictate what policy moves. But if you have a deep enough relationship, and if you have the ability to build relationships, not just because you have the same mindset or you came from the same place, but you're willing just to have the conversation, you can get done what it is that you want to get done. And I think that's something that you could see from afar, but being there and being in the midst of it is something that I've learned more, specifically being in that space myself.
I felt like he was very connected in the issues that are a part of this community. Definitely engaged and touched, and aware of what's going on, and not just glossing over like these are the facts. Very approachable, lots of really good energy. So I think for me, it's exciting, and kind of makes me feel like I'm really glad that I came, because I would not have known that this was his stance, would not have known that he was approachable and wants to be held accountable by the community, and is really connected to what we're doing and what we need to get done, and really in touch with things that are involved in our communities.
What would you like to see change in the neighborhood?
Honestly, man, the violence. Like I said, I'm a part of Cure Violence, so it's just this past year we had 43 homicides. You feel me? And just 3 years ago it was at 19. So it's growing rapidly. And we really need to get a hold on it, because it's just seeing these kids die and seeing these kids go out the way they're going out. I personally think a lot of it deals off of confusion and not having resources like we talked about a lot here. So I think that's what.
Just listen to Mr. Montgomery and his take on where we are in society as we prepare for this upcoming voting season. As a citizen of this city of Greensboro, what are you looking for as far as this candidate and what he can bring to the city of Greensboro?
I'm looking for him to impact the youth and help out more in the community. He said he was very hands-on in the community, and I want to see what he could do for the youth, more so the teenagers, the people who need people to look up to in the community, who need people to give them hope in the community.
First and foremost, I thought the brother was great. He was very profound. To be a young black man coming into the community, being able to kind of address a lot of different things that different genders around the walk of life, that I want to advocate to. It's like he's already on it, but most of all, he's hearing it, and he has a plan, and he has a way to address it.